Hi, this is Ken Womack, and you're listening to the Two Legs Podcast, your home away from home when it comes to all of your Paul McCartney needs.
Welcome back to Two Legs. This is episode number 269. This is our first show of the year for 2025. My name is Andy Nichols, and I'm one of the co-hosts of Two Legs. And joining me today is one of the co-founders of Two Legs. To my right, wearing an awesome white hoodie. Hello, Tom Hunyadi.
Andy, couple happies go to you. Happy New Year, happy birthday, happy New Year to everybody out there. Thanks for joining us in 2025. Hope it's going to be a fantastic year, which I'm sure it will be. And we got already right off the bat, we got a fantastic guest.
What better way
starting
to
it in style?
What better way to ring out the old and ring in the new with our friend, longtime friend and collaborator, Dr. Kenneth Womack. Ken, welcome back to Two Legs.
Oh, so proud to be here with you guys, and Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one.
Let's hope it's a good one. There's a little tongue-in-cheek reference there. Ha 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 ha. So, there is no news to report, thankfully. So we're going to dive right into it. Our first show of the year to have Ken on. And Ken, as we know, and if you don't know Ken, Ken is a professor of music and English literature at Monmouth University. And he is also the author of Living the Beatles Legend, The Story of Mal Evans, with another volume to come at the end of probably 2025. But we'll get to the end of the show for Ken to give us an update about that. But today it's all about Wings and Ken's take on Wings. So Ken, we know that you teach Beatles courses at Monmouth, and the students are really focused on the Beatles stuff. You don't really dive too much into solo work with the Beatles in your teaching, as far as I know. What can you tell us about Wings? Firstly, not your fandom of Wings, but just from an educational sense, as an educator, where is Wings on the radar of your students, just to start it out?
Sure. So you're right. I teach the way I approach the Beatles is an evolving art object, and so what I do is I go, please me to Abbey Road, essentially, and assess the quality of that incredible growth and development. Right. But along the way, and I use a little DeLorean icon you would enjoy. I have flash forwards where I will drop into the mix. For example, when we're talking about, the making of Lady Madonna in 1968, I'll flash forward to Wings in 1976, or, various moments with John, George, and Ringo. So I do a lot of contextual maneuvers to try to keep the students cognizant of the fact that this is all of a piece. It's of a larger tapestry. And even though we sit here now in 2025, that tapestry continues, right? So I like to think of art as a gigantic evolution, right? Influencing ad infinitum artists across the world and across time. So they do figure very strongly. In fact, today I showed, we did Help in my special winter course. We did the Help album, so I showed Wings doing Yesterday and I've Just Seen a Face.
Great.
Excellent.
And so often how we use them is I like to show how Paul developed as a vocalist from 65 on into 1976 and that magnificent comeback.
Great. And kind of culminating in that magnificent. And really, Wings, we know, continued on until 1981 officially, but really, they really climaxed in 76. And as you just said, as you showed those two classic performances to your students, yeah, they made two great albums after that, but by and large, they are critically looked at as reaching their kind of zenith in 1976, commercially and globally, and really everything after that. I don't want to say it was downhill, but it just certainly was not looked at the same way.
Okay, so perhaps critics might feel that way, but honestly, and I don't know if we've discussed this before, but for me, the apex was coming. Back to the Egg was a magnificent moment for me. I remember it dearly when it emerged and was released. And of course, as excited as I was by that and Good Night Tonight, I remember vividly I was being driven to the dentist because that's horrible by my dad. And I remember the first time we heard Coming Up live in Glasgow, and how we immediately looked at each other and thought, new Wings content, and how happy we were.
Because of your age, too, and I want to bring that up. Ken, you're born in 1966, correct?
I will not lie. You are correct.
So you probably probably were too young to experience any early Wings. I mean, you might be cognizant of it, but it's really probably from 76 on where they're really kind of in their sphere as you growing up as a young teenager, and now you're like, oh, okay, this is a wildly successful band, and I'm 10, 11, 12, 13 years old hearing Good Night Tonight and with a little luck in the later 70s stuff, right?
That's fair to say, and I was very excited by it, right? A guy discovering the Beatles, to have this active band taking place, putting out hits, was pretty exciting. And of course, same thing with John, in 1980, I followed all of those movements very closely.
All the while, though, still discovering the Beatles music at the same time, right? So Paul McCartney is evolving as a 1970s megastar with Wings, and you're still diving back into the Beatles stuff at the same time. So while Paul is just dominating the charts with Silly Love Songs and Speed of Sound and Venus and Mars, and being the guy like on par with Elton John there for a good minute in the mid 70s. Now you're kind of going back and listening to the American Beatle albums, I take it, at that point, because you probably didn't have access to the UK imports at that time, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I remember another big moment for my dad and myself was 1978 when we got Wings Greatest, right? I mean, that was a big deal for us to have all those songs together and to think about them in that fashion. I don't know if I answered the original question very well, but I think about Wings all day long. This band was so important to me. I memorized every detail about them, A-sides, B-sides, when release dates were. It was, I was quite the Wings scholar there for a moment.
Do you remember there was a book published there in the late 70s by Tony Jasper called Paul McCartney and Wings? I don't know if you recall that book, but it was mainly just a photo book and a discography book, but it was like, do you remember it? You remember? Oh, that was like, wow, just a book dedicated to Wings.
Well, I mean, Wings Tour USA was big for me.
Yeah.
That was, not that I learned that much information from it, but I was constantly flipping through those photos.
Right, because it is interesting. People, I think, like to, and correctly, kind of paint you as the Beatles expert, and you are. You're one of the world's best at it. But within that fandom is a deep love of Wings, which I think some people might just gloss over because, it's just Ken, and he just teaches Beatles stuff at Monmouth, not realizing that you could dive into this just as much as you wanted to, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I adore Wings, and I love that that you guys spend so much time thinking deeply about, McCartney's accomplishments generally, and certainly Wings.
Right. Yeah, I've been listening to the Wings Greatest with the SHM copy since it came out. I've been listening to it nonstop since January 1. It's a great compilation. I mean, the on there. I mean, look at, you got five five number ones. You got 5 singles. It's just a fantastic. I mean, look, we all know the listen to what the man said, not being there, and it sucks it's not being there, but it's still great.
Right, but then you've got like Another Day on there.
Yeah, which is wonderful, but why is listen to what the man said? Do we have a respectable answer on that? Because I remember even young me, guy who memorized all the
sleeve notes
of the singles. Right. I'm like, wait a second, let's listen to what the man said. What's going on?
R5949 is not listed here. Why is this not on here?
you look at it, I mean, you think, okay, Another Day and Uncle Albert, they're on there, okay. I look at it as just like Wings Light. It's like half of Wings. You got Denny, you got Linda there, and, so, I mean, is it Wings? No, but, kinda.
Wings fans sort of made up for it, but didn't quite either.
No, there still remains a full Wings anthology out there to be produced and made, hopefully one day. But, and I know this is kind of slightly off subject, but I mean, here you have, that comes out, and poor George is going, you're giving me one side of a greatest hits album, and half the songs have to be Beatles songs. Ringo's got a solo greatest hits album. John's got Shaved Fish. Paul's got Wings Greatest, and I got to have half my Beatle tracks on an album. That's like, what was EMI doing to poor George? Did I want to have too many tracks from All Things Must Pass on there? Come on.
Huh.
And before we dive into Wings proper, do you think that there is eventually an opportunity for students to take, or there would be courses offered on Paul McCartney, songwriter, musician? Is that saleable, do you think?
I don't know if I could get a course off the ground on Wings necessarily, but I know I could do one on Paul McCartney, songwriter, which would encompass. I have no doubt about that, and I know some schools have. I want to say the Berklee College of Music has.
They have a course on Paul. Wow. Okay.
Sure. I mean, that subject should be a no-brainer.
Yes.
His sense of structure, nuance, musicianship, vocalization, etc. I mean, that's probably a 2-semester course.
Could be. So let's go all the way back now. Let's go all the way back to December of 1971 and Wings Wildlife. Ken, for you, as we talked about, you're learning the albums in the mid to late 70s. How did you discover all these Wings albums? Obviously, you knew Band on the Run, but did you say, okay, well, what was that album, Wildlife? Well, I'm curious what that is. How do I go back and listen to that while he's this superstar? And what was your take on it when you first learned it?
I don't recall which discography I was using. It may have been the one in the back of Nicholas Schaffner's book, The Beatles Forever.
Beatles Forever.
But I was drawing on this discography. I mean, I could dig it out. It's back there somewhere, but behind me. But I had memorized those details before I had many of those records, right? So we had a Target near us, still there, where I grew up in Kingwood, Texas, and they had a wonderful record section that was always well stocked. And so, when I would go in, which would be once a week or whenever my mother would, if we were buying school supplies, remember those trips, I would make sure I got over to flip through the records. And I would just check things off, right? Okay, well, I've now gotten everything. Wildlife, check. Got to get Ram, check. And I didn't do them in any kind of chronological order. I did them really based upon critical reception, right? So got Band on the Run pretty early, got Wings of America pretty early. I was operating sort of in that fashion.
Sure.
Were you doing that with the other three as well at the same time, or are you doing one at a time?
So, no, I was not giving that same level of attention to George and Ringo. I was to John. It didn't take long to check off those boxes, but I was not doing the same thing with Ringo. I had the Ringo album, but I wasn't in a hurry to get rotogravure or anything like that. And George, I had Living in the Material World and All Things Must Pass. And of course, I experienced the George Harrison album in 1979 in real time, which was a thrill. Really loved that. So, so that happened. In any event, I think that's a good way to explain it. It was kind of haphazard, which is interesting because I wasn't operating that way in terms of my brain. Right. My brain was just was way ahead of this whole thing. Right. I had a great moment. I had a really great moment when we went to a record shop in Houston that's long gone called Earwax, which sounds really grotesque to me. And I finally talked my mother, and I finally talked her into taking me back down there. I had no idea, because I'm very young, remember, that it was a head shop. Right. I mean, like with serious bongs and all sorts of paraphernalia in it. It was crazy. And I just remember it so vividly. And And the first record I saw when I walked in, while my mother's looking at all the paraphernalia and thinking, oh my God, are we going to get arrested?
Right.
What the hell have we done? And it wasn't a very big store. But the first record I saw was Mull of Kintyre Girls' School.
Nice.
With that beautiful picture, the beautiful picture cover.
Sure.
I bought that thing right away.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure you played the B-side, right? You played the B-side first, right? Because what's this about?
Yeah, I knew I loved the B-side. I'd heard it already because there was a station in town called KRBE, and they were a pop station. They're still there. And I called one night when you could do a call-in, and I said, I want to hear Girls' School. And they're like, what? That we don't know what that is.
What's that? Yeah.
Well, because they didn't care about the Mull of Kintyre single, right? In an American station. That was like, it was a big giant so what? So anyway, that aside, I called in and I thought they weren't going to play it, but I kept the radio on. Sorry. And of course, like a kid in the 70s, a very young kid, but a kid nonetheless, I had my my cassette recorder, my little Panasonic,
next to it, at the ready.
I had it running. I had the tape running. So I had to edit it later, and there was Girls' School.
There was Girls' School. You heard it in all its glory, all its lyrical glory.
I was so happy, and I thought, my God, and I knew right then, I thought, I like this better than Mull of Kintyre, which, by the way, I like Mull of Kintyre, but I really like Girls' School. Yeah, it's a great rock tune.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Those are great memories. Because, in those days, and there's still a thrill of the search, right? The thrill of the search that we do when we're, when we're out looking for a song or a book or whatever. You can still experience that in the age of the internet, but it was different when you had to sort of go out and find things. I got in huge trouble in about 1984 or 5. My dad let me take the car to school with only one rule. You got to only use it when you're up. I was at Texas A&M, right? 90 miles from Houston. Well, I bought one of a very early CD player.
Ooh.
And the Japanese Wings Greatest came out.
Oh, wow. That probably cost a pretty penny.
And my roommates and I, we were early adopters of CDs, right? We knew exactly where you could go and get one in Houston. And what do you do? And it was so overpriced, $21.99. But who cares? To have this was going to be my first Wings release spinning on my CD player. We drove down there, and my dad noticed the mileage later.
Where did you go? Somebody, I don't know, Dad. Somebody borrowed the truck.
Now, what happened was, he was annoyed that I had taken this very old car out on the highway. But he couldn't wait to listen to that CD too, because he loved Wings Greatest. He's
Sure.
Not an idiot here.
No. The only problem with the CDs, you won't get the nice poster to take out and hang up on your wall in your college dorm room there at A&M. That's the problem.
I had the record at A&M and the poster. It was there. I did have it.
You did, because you brought the record with you. Of course you did. Now you have it on CD.
That was another thing that I explain to my students now. When you'd go every year, you'd go back after the summer, you would haul these crates around of your records, right? And break your back because, you got to have them all with you. And I think I had like 300 albums by the time I went to college.
Wow.
Wow. Great.
And your dorm room was probably like on the 5th floor too, right? So you had to cart them all up the stairs, probably. Oh God. Oh, the things that I'm sure you sit there, you tell these to your students, and they're probably going, "It sounds interesting, but we can't relate." Thank God you can't relate, because they can just say, "What music? I've got it all right here. I don't need to carry anything up."
Well, here's where the layers of irony have emerged. Okay, so I'll talk about this, and then I'll say, but I'm so happy that everything I have now is on my hard drive, and I can call up any song I want to anytime.
Yes.
To which they will say, my students right now at Monmouth, somebody invariably will say, why are you listening to the lesser fidelity of MP3s? We have gotten into vinyl and find that there's more sonic range. And then I look like this weird kind of abstract.
Right. Yeah, they're going, well, why aren't you listening to that on vinyl? Why are you listening to it on a yeah, that's where we're at now, which is actually maybe it's come full circle.
Unlike both of you, I do not have a turntable in this house.
You do not.
I do not.
Wow. Well, I think given your work and what you do, you have to have your stuff portable. You have to have it portable. It's just, how could you go through all those files? And you need to have them to write about them and to teach about them. You have to have them with you on your computer.
I don't know. I think we should do something about this. I think maybe me and you should chip in and just send them one. And
well, I know all my records are in our house in Pennsylvania, so
yeah,
my son checks on them regularly for me.
I do find that very, 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 very polarizing, though. Dr. Ken Womack does not own a turntable. We're in New Jersey. Wow.
No, I had one, but I gave it to my mother-in-law because hers died. So.
Well, we've got to make some calls down there and maybe to Red Bank and Jack's Records and send some stuff over.
As long as Jack doesn't bring the stuff, because I don't need that kind of negative energy.
God help us.
Wherever you are, Jack, you know I'm right.
Peace and love, Jack. Peace and love, Jack.
All right, so listen, you got Band on the Run, you got Venus and Mars, you got Wings Over, or Speed of Sound, Wings Over America. You're going back now. Let's try to get back on track here with Wildlife. Is it a WTF moment for you when you listen to Wildlife for the first time, or was it an enjoyable experience?
Yeah, so I have a good memory of this, and of course, the first time you listen to a lot of records, right, you retain those kind of initial experiences. And
yes,
I think one thing that's really helping me at this point is while I started subscribing to Rolling Stone as soon as I really got into music. So 77 maybe, when I was really certain that this was something that was just captivating to me. The reason that's good is because I miss every review of all of these records.
Right.
Yes.
Good points.
Now,
yeah.
I think in 79, I'll get the Rolling Stone record guide. So then I'll see what, the prevailing critics of Rolling Stone thought about all the albums. But
Landau, right?
Yeah.
No, but you weren't reading Landau's review of Ram in 1971, so you missed all that stuff.
No. So, and literally every single one of the Back to the Egg records, I didn't read a review about.
That's pretty interesting. Because
when I bought Wildlife, I had no preconceived notions. And I remember falling in love with side 2. I still love side 2.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, just it's a beautiful tapestry on side 2.
Yeah.
Even down to that magnificent bass work at the very end that Paul plays on the Rick.
The mumble, the bit.
Well, yes.
Yeah, the outro. Yes.
I just love it. And I remember, but I loved Some People Never Know, and
oh yes,
and all those songs. So the way it would work is because I wasn't polluted by particularly some of that negative McCartney criticism that was in some cases, as we know, engineered. Because I didn't have that in my head, I would just, like we all do, gravitate toward the songs I liked.
Without any preconceived notions of what you should like and not based on what you read, because you didn't know it. You bought it to listen to it, and then you made your judgment.
And I remember, the written word is so powerful. I remember when I got that Paul Gampuccini interview book. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when I got that, and they were talking in the interview about Love and Song,
right,
from Venus and Mars. I hadn't spent very much time with it, and immediately I'm breaking out Venus and Mars and playing that to listen to and appreciating it. So I mention this because that's how powerful those kinds of insinuations are. I'm glad I didn't read negative reviews of some of these other things, because then I could love Monkberry Moon Delight or Creen Acror or whatever without anybody telling me whether it's good or not.
Right. And 54 years ago, 50 some odd years ago, the printed word, I don't want to say that it means less now. Of course it doesn't, but it held much more weight back in the 70s. When somebody, if you got Rolling Stone and you're reading John Landau and he's ripping Ram, that's going to turn off a lot of the music buying public based on his thoughts and opinions on the album. It's a little different now because there's so many outlets for it now. But back then,
but don't you think you're absolutely right? I mean, there are 10,000, maybe more, right? Music oriented review websites, probably more given blogs and those sorts of things. But there is the power of primacy and recency. And the first thing you read, right? If it's a panning, if you accidentally hit a review in Variety of somebody who has an axe to grind, that could cloud your point of view.
Right. I just think it's cool that you didn't, by the time you came to Wildlife, you were like, okay, I'm just going to like this based on the songs that I like. And especially, I think we're all in agreement here, side 2 is the winner on that. I mean, side 1's
it's
all
far
right.
superior. Yeah.
It's okay.
Songs on it. No, let's not,
Wildlife, the track is a great vocal exercise there. Paul is just wailing away, screaming on that one. His playing is great on that. But side 2, with Some People Never Know, and I Am Your Singer, and Tomorrow, and Dear Friend, and the little outro, the jam on the Bop Link. I mean, that's for early Wings. You can listen to that and go, okay, this was obviously a good little band that was tight. And obviously at the time, Paul's like, well, I was channeling Dylan, and because he did his album, I think it was Self-Port. I don't know if it was New Morning. I think was done in a week, and he was trying to channel Bob doing New Morning, and that's why the album was done so quickly.
I still think, I hate that reasoning. I think that's a poor excuse to make up for, maybe a subpar album. And you don't do that for your first album with a new band, right? I don't think you just do that, But I mean, you really get a.
Yeah, it is a strange maneuver, the way they recorded it so quickly, using some of the leftovers from Ram. But the cool thing? I didn't know any of this. So
we didn't know.
all I knew was I liked Give Ireland Back to the Irish, because I did collect all the singles so I could have them all in a row first.
Right? Sure.
So every time a new one would come along, I would insert it where it belongs.
I mean, even those.
It really confused me when I got the 12-inch version of Goodnight Tonight. What do I do?
Where do I put this?
It's not an album.
Yeah.
But it's a 12-inch sleeve.
You never know. Yeah. Some people you never know is my favorite song on the album, but it's Tomorrow where you really get a sense of where Wings are going to go in the future. You were with the backing vocals, with the Denny, the Paul, and Linda backing vocals. That's the song that really
Tomorrow
gives you. Lets you know where they're headed.
Absolutely, that's where they were headed, and that was the song that was supposed to be a single, which was pulled at the last minute.
Right.
I do remember, talking about becoming sort of Beatles or solo literate. I remember when I first read about Wings and Rolling Stones, somebody, it's probably my pal Dave Marsh, made a crack about them and said they were bubblegum.
Yes.
And I asked, my mother, what do you think they mean by that? And she told me, and, it's kind of obvious. And I already knew at that point, because I had Wings Over America and I had several other records. They're not bubblegum. The band that does Soily is not bubblegum.
But where's that? All right, so if Dave, if that quote's attributed to Dave, and I think it is, what is Dave listening to that makes him say bubblegum? Is it Mary Had a Little Lamb? Is it My Love? What Wings song?
Another Day, maybe?
Bubblegum? No way.
I don't know. It could be, these kind of soft rock songs, Warm and Beautiful, who knows? The problem with that approach to Paul's accomplishments is it never takes the whole of his career or even his album output into consideration. So when you go back and listen to those records, you realize that all of them have a lot of variety. He's always, from the White Album on, Paul McCartney has had a lot of variety. I mean, that's been how he operates. And, there's as much hard rocking as there is soft material that one might call bubblegum, right?
Right. Or schmaltz, maybe. I don't know.
I think
I would even say Revolver, even starting with Revolver, that's where you really get a sense of his variety.
Sure, fair enough. And certainly as a band, they're they're giving us Whiplash, which I love. It's the greatest Whiplash of all time, right? Whiplash around as they change genres and styles. Um, I think there was just too much of a move to pigeonhole Paul as this kind of softy. When when you look at the music Paul likes, I mean, he was an early devotee of Led Zeppelin. One of his closest friendships still today is Dave Gilmour.
Dave Gilmour, yep.
I mean, it just never worked for me. But again, because I didn't have all that baggage, I was kind of able to think for myself in these crucial moments.
Just listening to the records as you encountered them, and I think that's one of the greatest things about not looking at a review and being okay, not knowing that there's a review. You're just collecting music to collect music.
Sure, and let's face it, not one of us here is a first generation fan.
No.
Which is, I think, very important and useful because we understand the way that all of our students and future adherents, and there will be hundreds of millions, if not billions of them who will love this music, they're going to discover it the same generally haphazard way where they ease into a catalog. I had a student today in the help lecture say, I was asking them, so anybody have a favorite song so far? And this woman said, she's probably 18. She said, you know what? This is new to me because I've always listened to only the later stuff. And she reeled off the album she listens to, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, White Album, Abbey Road. Right. Completely predictable. She said, so the jury's out for me on that. But it was interesting. That's how she encountered the band, and that's where she went.
I think that's going to be, we're deviating a little bit, but I do think that, and we've talked about this in the show too, the later Beatles are rightly praised and celebrated, but as younger students and people find early gems on the early albums, especially like with this recent 64 dump of stuff that have just come out again on vinyl, that's the stuff that the kids, I think younger people will be like, wow, look at a deep album cut like, I don't know, I've Just Seen a Face, like you mentioned earlier from the Help album.
We had a great time today with 2 B-sides, I'm Down and Yes It Is. I mean, those are marvelous songs and to discuss and analyze and enjoy. And I could tell a few people were bopping along to Yes It Is. A couple of the young women, I think John won it over.
He won them over in their 3/4 time, and please don't wear red in their 3.
Do not wear red. He's like a matador.
Speaking of red,
speaking of red, jumping back to Wings, next album, Red Rose Speedway, April 1973, in all its glory, its gatefold package. It's artwork that was done by Eduardo Palozzi. So it was a Scottish-born artist who studied in Liverpool, and he actually is the artist that was at Liverpool John Moores University, where Stewart actually won the competition for the 75 quid to buy the bass. So see how it all connects there with Eduardo Palozzi doing the art later on for Red Rose Speedway. See, it's all connected, folks. Listen, Red Rose Speedway is my favorite Wings album. Ken, go.
These days, it is not my favorite, but I got to tell you, it's the second one I bought.
Ooh, okay.
And I unabashedly adore it. I still love it just as much. I just have, I would probably throw a couple of other ones ahead of it. Back to the Egg and probably Band on the Run. But I love the thing, and I had my first girlfriend around this time. And so those songs like Hands of Love, etc., all of that stuff really resonated with me. No, it did, because it was kind of Little Lamb Dragonfly. All of those songs really resonated with me because they were usefully non-combative, right? And of course, now when we get the full double album version of that, we see that there's a lot more.
A lot more.
That people weren't taking into consideration. But no, I love that record.
Talk about album sides. It's almost like the reverse of Wildlife. I know Tom has this opinion. We all agree that side 2 of Wildlife is great, but side 1 of Red Rose Speedway is, in our opinion, it's perfect album side. Big Barn Bed, My Love, Get on the Right Thing, One More Kiss, and Little Lamb Dragonfly. I mean, that's a phenomenal side 1. Would you not agree, Ken?
If you can't, tear up for Little Lamb Dragonfly, we can't help you. But
we can help you in.
Yeah, that's true. Get on the Right Thing is a magnificent composition.
It is. It is. And
Yeah,
vocal.
it's a great little tune.
A Ram leftover. I mean, go figure. I mean, so prolific the songwriting period there.
Since we're confessing everything tonight, my first band, my garage band, we did the medley,
Yes.
and it was terrible, but we tried.
But you tried.
We tried, but there must have been a power cut because we didn't.
Oh. It wasn't meant to be.
Mm-mm.
And they didn't love you so.
No. Yeah. I love these records, and unabashedly, I love wildlife. So,
but what say you, Ken, about the fact that Paul, obviously with the medley, which I'm partial to, and Tom knows this. Tom could take her to leave it. I think the medley is a great example of Paul's songwriting. But again, were people hearing a medley and going, "Oh, is he just trying to redo Abbey Road?" Well, this isn't nearly as good. And to be frank, it's not. It's not nearly as good as the Abbey Road medley. Of course not. Nothing could be. But I do love the fact that Paul does bring those songwriting qualities back into Wings a little bit. He's going back to what leaned on, the George Martin style of interweaving these melodies together, especially at the end of Power Cut. You're hearing Hands of Love and Hold Me Tight and Lazy Dynamite. All in Power Cut, you're hearing all those three songs weave in and out of each other as the record closes out. That's what's fascinating to me about the medley, is McCartney's brilliance of taking those and bringing them back into it before he says, "See you later."
Yeah,
what's fascinating to me? What's fascinating to me about it?
Go ahead. Hold on. Go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to say is I'm with John Lennon on this. When you're looking back retrospectively, you should recognize that you have all this great music, right? Some of it, yeah. I mean, the medley on Abbey Road is, I'll say it to my class next week. If we didn't have it, we're probably not talking about the Beatles. I mean, it is the superlative end to an unparalleled career. It's literary, it's dramatic. But having said that, just because there's the Abbey Road medley doesn't mean I don't love Winter Rose, Love Awake,
Sure.
or After the Ball, or take your pick. I want it all. That's why I keep it all on my computer, right? I want it all with me at all times.
At all times, yes. Tom, what were we going to say?
I get that. No, I'm saying, I mean, it's fine, but you're still sitting on so many. You're sitting on The Mess. You're sitting on on Best Friend. You're sitting on Seaside Woman. You're sitting on, I think, songs that could have maybe enhanced the album a little bit more. And you guys like it. That's fine. But I'm saying, you have so many other great songs to choose from, and you're trying to make this band a band. Give Denny his lead vocal. With I Lie Around, maybe. Give Linda her lead vocal with Seaside Woman.
Well,
but I understand that the record label wanted a Paul McCartney record. I get it.
Well, they did, but Paul wanted a double album. He wanted a double album. They were like, no, we want a Paul McCartney album, and more of a Paul McCartney album. We know you're trying to push this band thing, because we know that Wings spent a lot of 72 on the road touring, small, and then going big and doing tour. So and working on Rose Speedway, which took forever to record. As we know, some songs were painfully recorded slow in the studio. Glyn Johns even walks out halfway through Rose Speedway and says, "See you later, Paul. I can't do this anymore. You guys are just too stoned all the time. I can't deal with this." But Paul doesn't get the double album, and I think at that point, I think he in hindsight, it would have been great to get the double album, but I know why the record company said, "Look, let's just have a Paul McCartney record." And listen, that's his first #1 record. Go ahead, Ken.
Is there? And I mean, we can't argue history. It exists as it exists. But was there? And I apologize to Alan and Adrian if I'm missing this important detail. But was the contract with EMI? Did it stipulate that if the double album, 2 records would count as 2? I mean, would that have taken away one of their solo Beatle opportunities?
No, there was no information on that, whether it was a double album or not. Yeah.
Meaning it would be curious. 2 records taken away from. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think that is the case. No.
Because there are some contracts where a 2-record set would eat up part of your commitment. Anyway, that aside, part of the problem, and this is, I think, why we love him at a certain extent, is that it was Paul who is is the one who has whimsy, and he's told people like Chris Thomas that I don't necessarily know what a hit is. I think we got to take him at his word, especially back in those days when he would say things like that. I think his impulse was to have the 2-record set that you wanted, Tom, but we know the story of Back to the Egg, where he keeps rethinking the contents
Right.
of that
Yes.
album. I think Paul is being very honest with us when he says that he creates this enormous catalog of music, but doesn't necessarily know what's going to hit or what isn't going to hit. I think he's telling the truth with that. And one of the things that makes him, and always will, better than everybody else is there is a natural organicism to his songwriting and musical performance that is just spot on. You started singing some of the lyrics from the medley on Red Rose Speedway, and immediately I'm hearing him sing "Oh Lazy Dynamite," or maybe "I love you so, love you so, I love you." There are organic moments on all of his records that just make them exciting. There's
Yes.
a drama to them. The guitar licks that he will break off always seem so perfect for the moment. That is not, for nothing, as my Russian teacher used to say. It's not uncanny. It is what he does. That is his style, and his gift is to be able to, you mentioned Uncle Albert. That whole song is made up of these kind of moments where
Right.
he's
Yep.
coming up with the exact right idea in the moment where it needs to be.
Right. And to harken back to what you said before, Ken, I think Paul is such a, he wanted critical appraise, he wanted critical favor in the worst way. And we didn't get it. It just really bothered him. It really bothered him to get these negative reviews, especially in the wake of the breakup, when all the emphasis was on John and the praise was on John. And it was just easy to just crap on Paul again because he's just being a silly pop artist and not realizing there's some really good songwriting and arranging going on here, and frankly, kick-ass playing, as you mentioned earlier. That
Sure. And I feel bad for him because, of course, he probably didn't realize the full extent to which Jan Winter and others were working against him to make John be cool and Paul be not cool. But these guys were probably screwed back in '63 when was it William Mann wrote the review of With the Beatles.
With the Beatles.
What amazing artists they are, whatever the headline was for that. They at a very young age learned to read their own notices, right? And have to live with those kind of critical remarks. So, they were reading the reviews.
And John, I think, could take it or leave it. But Paul, I think, was always really.
No. So my understanding is John frames that review.
Does it? Oh, the William Mann one?
Yeah, the Aeolian cadence.
Alien cadences. Yeah, not a second time. Yeah.
The Aeolian cadences from Gustav Mahler. And I think it was, you can see it in some of the photos of his study where he has all the, safe as milk and the stickers. He framed that, because it meant something to him. Here's a guy from Liverpool and he's being written up in the Times.
Right.
Damn, that's the win. George Martin probably had it framed in every room in his house. The acceptance that the Times brings with it's enormous.
But Paul, and you're right, it is, and especially for a Scouser like Lennon, right? Rough background, everything else like that. But Paul's been a people pleaser his whole life. He always wanted to make people happy, and when he gets reviews,
he wants the A.
He wants the A.
Yeah,
he wants the A. Okay, I've just written a great album. It's a U.S. #1. Why are you crapping on it? Why are you treating me like this?
Why did I get the C+ when? Yeah.
There's that. There's a lot of that, and that narrative takes Paul all through the '70s, really, and then it starts to change because it has to change with the next album, and the next album being Band on the Run.
Where he finally gets the A. He gets the A.
He gets the A. He gets the A finally because they had to.
8 months later. Yeah.
8 months later, end of 1973, and he rides all of '74 with the success of Band on the Run, all while getting Wings Mark II together with Jeff Britton coming in now and Jimmy McCullough coming in now, and then Jimmy McCullough coming in. So this is now Band on the Run. This is Paul's moment to say, okay, he does the Rolling Stone interview. Now he's on the Rolling Stone cover for the first time, Tom, right? For the first time, right?
No. This is like the third time.
For the one with Paul and Linda with the interview?
1970. No, he was in the cover in 1970 of Rolling Stone, and I think he also was on one more, and then in 74, January 74, I think it is, that he's on the cover.
Well, this is the interview, the Band on the Run interview, the in-depth one now, where they're like Rolling Stone now is acknowledging Paul, reaching it with Band on the Run, and here's where really now Wings is ready to kind of take on the world, move forward, and now, favor starts to turn. I mean, and here's an album that Paul, just every track aside from Mamunia, Paul has played live in some form or another throughout his whole career. Except Mamunia, he's played every track from this album.
And that was going to be the single.
And it was John Landau who wrote that review, right? When John, who's a wonderful person, by the way, very good friend of our university, John wrote that and has that wonderful poetic moment at the end. It's the finest album yet by a member of the band that once called themselves the Beatles.
Right.
Whew. What a turn of phrase that was.
A little bit. 3 years later, some difference from Ram to Band on the Run. And I'm wondering what Paul thought about that. Has John ever spoken to Paul about any of this stuff that you know of?
I have no idea.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Quick question, rapid fire, Ken Womack. Band on the Run with Helen Wheels or without Helen Wheels? Go.
Well, this is the case again of primacy, and the album I bought had Helen Wheels, so it was always there.
Right.
It was kind of a non-issue to me. It was something that I never got worked up about. I mean, I didn't hear it till I had the album, right? It was in my collection of singles, of course. But it was always on the album as far as I
love this. The singles just the singles. I'm sure. I hope they're still like this, Ken, and they're in great shape. I hope they are.
They are in good shape.
Well, I mean, it fits.
Go ahead, Tom. What were we gonna say?
I mean, the Helen Wheels. I mean, it fits the context of the album. I mean, looking back we understand now that he didn't want it, but he was forced to have. I mean, so he agreed to have it on the U.S. Version, but everywhere else he didn't want it on it. I mean, we understand that now, but it also fits the context of the album too, in Helen Wheels. So in that regards, I think it works. But we also want the album, true to what the artists intended it to be as well. And that was without it.
For me, though, love the record. Picasso's Last Words. I enjoy very much the acoustic section at the beginning and the one that they would play on Wings Over America. But once it starts meandering into medley territory and all of these different hijinks and sounds, it loses me. I liked it as a very young person, and now I vastly prefer the medley on Rose Speedway to what happens at I don't know, the last 3 minutes of that song.
Right, maybe. Because it kind of just sits there and kind of goes into jet and comes back again.
And
all this.
It felt purposeless. And that was unusual for me with Paul. It didn't feel like it had a reason to exist.
I felt the same way you did until Jeff Emmerich died. We did our show on Talk More Talk about Jeff Emmerich, and then the Queen brought up a great point: is who's that song about? I mean, Picasso. I mean, for me, I think that second half is honoring him as an artist in the way. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So trying to show different ways of telling the story is the same way that Picasso would have different periods and different shades of meaning as a painter.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's pretty good.
It could be. It does meander a little bit, but it's always held my interest. I've never felt like it's too but I could see why after that first half of the song, which it's great. It's got a great structure, right? It opens up, Denny opens it up, boom, lyric, got the verse right away. Into the chorus, great, hooks you right in. And then it kind of takes a little bit of a left-hand turn and goes into another thing. And then it finally comes back to it. And it closes that way. It's kind of a party piece. I like it. I don't feel it sags the record down too much.
And let's face it, that first piece, we don't ever say enough about how well Denny and Paul would sing together. Their voices accented each other. I mean, obviously Lennon and McCartney were a cut above. Yesterday we did Beatles for Sale, and I probably made my students listen to the middle eights for Babies in Black, and I don't want to spoil the party too many. They're just so amazing. I mean, they're works of beauty, and all too short, right? But Denny and Paul harmonized really well together, and Linda well inside of that vocal range too.
For sure. Mamunia seems to be the track that's gotten forgotten in the 50+ years since Band on the Run. It was supposed to be a single, as Tom said. I've always enjoyed Mamunia. Ken?
I love it. I love No Words. I mean,
right.
No Words. One of my favorite songs. I mean, that's become my favorite song on the album.
The 79 tour. Ken, if you only got on a plane and flew to the UK, you would have seen it live. Great.
Well, I did see live the midnight interview with, I guess it would have been 5 a.m. for Paul when Tom Snyder interviewed him live.
Yes.
After the show at the Rainbow Theater. And I watched it with my dad, and we stayed up late. And Dad said, when they come here next year, we're going. Japan.
And as Lawrence Juber told us, too, I mean, they would be coming to America with a number one with coming up at the Live at Glasgow. That would have been incredible. Who knows? Who knows where things would have. Wings continues. They've got a U.S. number one, but sadly was not to be. Moving on now. Now we go to the summer of '75 and Venus and Mars. And I think everywhere, my dad told me this, everywhere you turned the radio dial in 1975, in the summer of '75, some station had that song on. In perpetuity, all summer, all the time. Listen to what the man said. You could not go a summer without hearing that song.
That's right, and that's why, even though I'm a late bloomer to a lot of this, I already knew that song.
You knew it because it was just it was everywhere.
In the same way, even more so, I knew Silly Love Songs before I knew it was Paul McCartney.
Ooh, so you didn't realize, you didn't know that was Paul initially. You just knew it was a pop song.
I become a Beatles guy in '77, and very shortly after that, start buying Wings. Silly Love Song, I wasn't listening, but it was so profuse, that song, that you couldn't go anywhere and not hear, I love you.
Right. Those two songs, listen to what the man said, and Silly Love Songs. Two mega hits for Paul. One of which he leaves off Wings' greatest, and one he hasn't played live since '76. Really, such an anomaly with those two songs. Biggest.
It's a shame because he's got that incredible lead bass part. Whoa.
Oh,
yes.
With the Rick. I mean, it's incredible, and the strut, and he's got everything going, and I know that Linda was such an integral part of that song, and that's likely why it hasn't been played. But he's got a horn section. He got the Hot City Horns now. He could play it. But
the thing is, Linda's a part of that band in the '89, '90 tour, '93 tour. I mean, she's a part. She's there. There's no reason why he couldn't have done that track.
Yeah, different tours. Different times. But Venus and Mars is funny. The interview, the Paul McCartney interview that he did with Vic Garbarini that you guys did way back in the day on Two Legs before me. If you listen to that interview, Vic asked him about Venus and Mars, and Paul says, "Oh, that's an album, I never really liked." He goes, "And then I was at a party one time, and a music professor at Smith College had it on, and he was raving about it. And then he goes, oh, I'm going to listen to it." And then Paul totally changed his opinion on Venus and Mars because this music professor at Smith said it was a great album. I mean, come on. It's a smash. I mean, it's a lot of our friends' favorite album, Venus and Mars. I think in some ways it's kind of better than Men on the Run. Ken, what say you?
I don't think I agree with that. Simply because I think the other one's tighter. But man, of the 1970s album, Venus and Mars always feels like the 70s to me.
Yeah.
It's of its time.
Let's pose with these giant red and yellow balls.
Very Floydish.
Why not?
Well, Paul was so, again, as you mentioned earlier in the show, Paul and Gilmore, tight, thick as like they were really close friends. I think Paul found a lot of inspiration from Pink Floyd. Obviously, the sci-fi element of Paul's interest in a lot of these things, especially in the 70s, and the planets and the star, all that was kind of in vogue in the mid 70s, right? You've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind that comes out, and this is before Star Wars, but all that stuff is starting to happen, right? It's cool, man. It's the space. It's all this trippy, space travel stuff, and Gene Roddenberry and all that other stuff. So it's just interesting that became a concept album, in essence, but. I mean, you've got, it's more a little bit of a democratic album than Band on the Run, because you've got songs by, you've got Spirits of Ancient Egypt,
Kenny.
and you've got Medicine Jar on there too. But then you've got stuff like Call Me Back Again, which is just a wailer of a wailing of a song on there. But it also has things like Letting Go, which was a single but flopped. But I think Venus and Mars and Rock Show, Venus and Mars and Rock Show, yeah,
Right.
That gritty guitar right there, that's not bubblegum.
No, that's not bubblegum, but but you gave me the answer and that's what drives people crazy about Paul. How do you go from Venus and Mars Rock Show to Love and Song, and now you gave me the answer? But that's Paul. That's Paul. That's who he's going to be. As you said earlier, we have our head spin from all the different genres.
I did find that a number of those songs, like you gave me the answer, they were better on Wings Over America, I thought.
Agreed. 1,001% agreed.
The band had spent about 18 months with them, of course. I like that Paul's revisiting things now and has been for several years, like Junior's Farm, 1985, which is just 85. Magnificent. There may still be room out there for silly love songs. I know the guys in the band constantly parade parts of his back catalog for him, giving him, the opportunity to say, you're right, that's pretty good. Let's Let Him In. That's how many of these songs have found their way back in the mix.
Because of the pushing of the band. So thank you, Abe and Brian and Rusty and Wix for doing that, for pushing that. That's where we have these. We have these songs in the set now. Let Him Into. Speed of Sound's an interesting one, Ken, because that is like the most democratic Wings album, I think. Out of all the Wings albums, that is the one that's the most democratic. It's the one that people probably overlook the most. We did an episode a few months back on it because, is it one that it's really Paul trying to do what he did on Rose Speedway. Now he's actually achieving it with the full support of the label. It can be called Wings. It's not Paul McCartney in Wings. It's just Wings at the Speed of Sound. What's your instant take on there on Speed of Sound?
I mean, it's a ballsy record in the sense that, he had plotted a course for dominance, right? That's what set up Band on the Run so well. And he is just hitting every mark, right? Everything's number one or number two when we get to London Town, right?
Yep.
But he's hitting every single mark. And that record was made to meet the hit parade, 2 bona fide top 5 singles. And by the way, Beware My Love, another hard rockin' tune, right? That with that crunching guitar. What a beautiful song. I love Warm and Beautiful. I like.
Yeah, no, but I think, and Tom and I have talked about this, I think the songs on Speed of Sound cook way better live than on record.
Live.
Do you agree?
But Where My Love, I think, really cooks on live, yeah.
Oh,
I agree with you, although they don't, in the live version, they didn't have that cool acoustic intro.
Yeah, no.
But, that aside, that's a minor nitpick, right? No, they're wonderful songs, and I like that record. That's Paul loving being in a band, right? And so much has been written about Mr. Lennon and his dealings with these albums. Did he think they were bad or not? He just liked a well-crafted song. I mean, it was Bob Gruen, I think, who said when John heard Silly Love Songs, he said, "Wow, that's fantastic." I mean, it's gonna be a smash. He's not laughing at it. He knows. I mean, that's craft. He knows. Wow.
And he knows Paul. He knows Paul. He's like, this guy can write a hit in his sleep if he tried it. Lennon famously said he said it at some point. Paul will make a good album when he's scared enough to do it. And I don't know where that quote is attributed to. Ken, you might off the top of your head, but
I think it was with Robert Hilburn, and he praised Paul a lot in that interview from the LA Times.
right.
And there's that, you see it every now and then on Reddit. There was that wonderful word association quiz somebody put in front of him in the late 70s.
Extraordinary.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes. Paul, extraordinary. Yes.
Extraordinary. Yes.
Damn.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm Paul, I look at that, weekly.
No, you frame that. That's what you frame.
That's what
you frame that.
Right. That's
your validation. Yeah,
right.
That's magnificent.
I hope Paul knows about that. I hope he does.
I bought Wings at the Speed of Sound after it came out. I bought it after Wings Over America.
Okay.
So I kind of would dip in and out of that record because I'd had experiences, as Tom suggested, with the live versions already. So it was, but I enjoyed it, but I didn't have time because by this point, I'm buying them pretty rapid fire.
Well, now your fandom has started. It's 1977, and now you're all in, and you're like, I'm experiencing this stuff in real time. And in 1977, Wings is riding high on the success of Wings Over America, which comes out at the end of 76, triple album, so they can ride that success really all the way through 77.
The most expensive thing in the world, because my parents would have bought me anything supporting this habit, but that aside, they liked me to use my allowance. And what was that thing? It was like $21.99 or something.
Was it that much in 1977? A 3 LP set in 77? I thought it was like maybe 14 or 15 bucks. Wow.
Well, that's why when Tusk comes out in 79 and it's $14.98 or $15.98, that's why that seemed like such a high price. I was getting 3 records nearly for that from Paul.
Right.
And the excitement back then, as I was coming to these in reverse, so to speak, was always to see what they were going to do with the labels, right?
Right.
What was going to be on the record label. So no matter which album, whether it was a Lennon album or a Harrison or what have you, I just couldn't wait to get to the label.
And Paul employs hypnosis, obviously, to do all the art, the customized artwork on the labels and the cover, not the painting. The painting we know is our friend Jeff Cummings. He did the gate, and the gatefold is great, but the gate it doesn't make any sense because it's actually not a reproduction of any moment of the live show. It's really it's a hodgepodge of a painting. It really is.
Okay, here's something for you out of left field. So
go.
I remember I had my records when there were only about 100 of them. They would fit on this one shelf in my room. And there was one at the end of one summer, a bird, a blue jay, none of this is made up, fell in our backyard with a broken leg. And my mother, who was a great lover of Animalia, took the blue jay, and brought it into our house. This is before we had cats, notably. And I think I named him Mickey. He and I were on the cover of the local town paper. It said a bird and his friend. I was the friend. And he lived in my room for about 2 years. It was wonderful to have him there. Mickey was a wonderful companion, but he did not have a litter box. And after he died, didn't he? I was kind of sad after Mickey died, and I remember I opened up that gatefold for Wings Over America, and there was a very long streak of white fecal matter from Mickey, and I had like a little Mickey moment. And
how long after Mickey passed?
It was a few months, but nothing makes you miss a pet like feces, I'll tell you.
Hey, Jeff Cummings, if you're watching or listening, sorry about that, bud. Sorry about that one.
There's no spell. Mickey was a well-kept bird.
Oh God!
That moment. And those covers were so slick, it just wiped right off.
Came right off. So, Wings rides that through 77, and then they take the break a little bit, and now they start to record London Town. early 77, which comes out in 78, obviously famously recorded
gets
in the
pregnant.
Virgin Islands on the Fair Carol, and just a different kind of album, folky. You know, Wings has just done basically three really, I mean, Band on the Run, Venus and Mars, Speed of Sound, a triple live album. Wings is like cooking, and now they just kind of scale it back. They're not going to go on touring. Linda's pregnant now, obviously, and they put together a little kind of folky, modern, kind of synth-heavy pop album, which after Red Rose Speedway is my favorite Wings, is my second favorite Wings album. London Town, I think we talked about this when you visited my house a few months ago, Ken. You love this record.
I do love this record, and I mostly bought it in real time. I was still a few months behind because I was really Beatling pretty heavy, but I remember when With a Little Luck came out, I bought that single again with the picture disc, and I wore that record out. I adore that song. You know, Paul, I know you watched this show. Bring it back to the set list, please, or bring it for the first time ever. What a
For
marvelous
the first time.
It was supposed to be played in Japan in 1980. It was rehearsed.
Yeah, it was just a beautiful work. And when I delved into the album, I remember loving. I still do love Morris Moose and the Grey Goose.
Yes. From first listen, or you had to warm up to it?
First listen. What makes Paul so magnificent? I mean, he's the best singer in the business from 66 to 84, maybe. And what makes him so marvelous is his ability to take on different voices. And he does like an old sea salt kind of voice.
The Grey Goose was a steady dose. People said she never floated.
I love it. Well, and then Wanderlust, and of course you think about The Pound is Sinking and all these different voices that are going to come up later. I was in love with that from the word go. I loved London Town until I watched recently. I watched that video again. That was a bad idea. That Lindsay Hogg.
Video.
That was Michael Lindsay and Victor Spinetti off to the side there playing teacups with his ears.
Yeah, it's their fault. It's their fault. Janine and I watched it because we spent some time in the big studio there at Twickenham, and so we went to revisit things that were made there, and we were like, let's just listen to this one.
I mean, Denny looks half asleep in that video.
Yeah. He's thinking about his next flamenco guitar lesson or whatever.
Beautiful song though. Beautiful opener on the album too. I mean, it really is.
It came up the other day in my car. I've had enough. Another rock song from the Bubblegum Band, right?
From the Bubblegum Band, which again, that album is a little on the lighter side, but I've had enough.
Name and Address.
Right. Name and Address, which was their little pastiche to Elvis, of course, to round it out. It's a long album. It's like 54 something minutes, which is a long. That's a long album in the late 70s. Yeah. 14 tracks. Most albums were 38 minutes, 35 minutes. It was a long record. Of course, you've got Morris Moose, which is 6 something minutes on there. Full version of With a Little Luck is nearly 6 minutes. With that wonderful, and now in that middle solo, the synth solo, isn't that fantastic, Ken, With a Little Luck? You can't listen to the radio edit of With a Little Luck. You just can't.
There is no wasted moment. I have every note memorized. There is no wasted moment in there.
In that, yeah.
Including that great little moment where he gets the squawk on the synths, on the synthesizer. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's that great little moment.
I know it. I know it. God, I hear it. I can't play, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
I learned how to play it on my Casio as a kid. I had one of those Casio. It's now in the hands of my brother Andrew, but that Casio, I learned how to play it. I wanted to learn how to play that great intro, and then I learned the solo.
Oh, such a good thing.
Very cool.
Genesis.
Oh boy.
Those two things are related for me, because I liked the synth work on London Town and began to go into a massive Genesis phase.
What, the early Phil era, or you went back to Peter? You went to the Peter era.
I started with, the early Phil at that point, which would have been 78, 79. And then naturally had to go back because there was no other place to go, until Duke came along, which is one of my favorite records ever.
Of all time. of all time.
Yeah.
But that could be a whole different show entirely, couldn't it, folks? If we did a whole show on Genesis with Ken. Wow, that's a great shirt you got there, Ken. Is that from an album or just a tour, or what do you got there? It's just Genesis.
Just a fun.
Oh,
shirt.
it's the Mad Hatter. It's the Mad Hatter Genesis hat. Oh, lovely. On the famous Charisma label, folks. The famous Charisma label. Tony Stratton Smith. Good stuff.
I love that label. Love that label.
I would never
Really
have come
cool
up
label.
with that. Happy birthday boy! You nailed that.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, London Town, now the members of Wing, Joe English departs, Jimmy McCulloch departs, and now Wings is reduced to a trio by the time the album comes out in March of '78. But by which time Paul has recruited Lawrence Juber and Steve Holley, and now their work on the final version of Wings Mark V is working on Back to the Egg, and that's done down at Soho at the replica studio that Paul had built at the bottom of the studio to make it look like Studio 2 at Abbey Road. And that's where some of that album was recorded, and some of it was also, we also know, was recorded up in Lim Castle as well. Some of it was done up there as well too. Ken, obviously we know that this one sticks dear to your heart because it's probably the first real true album that you might have identified with since starting your rock and roll and music collecting sojourn. And you identify with this album still and very strongly with it. And I would love to hear your take on Back to the Egg. It's produced by Chris Thomas, who you worked with and interviewed. So let's hear it.
Well, by this time I'm getting Billboard, and I remember being furious that Goodnight Tonight didn't move beyond number 5 or whatever, because it was such a great song. And I followed that, and of course it whetted my appetite for Back to the Egg. I stayed up late to hear it played on KOLL, the rock station 101.1, I think, in Houston, and they played the Cars' Candy-O. And then they played Back to the Egg, which actually was a great record, so I got to enjoy that. And of course, I had my tape going. But it didn't matter because I bought both of them anyway. It's not like I pirated them, right?
No.
I loved it. Top to bottom, I love that record. It's Paul's being democratic with that record, but it's just better. Again and again and again is wonderful, etc. I love that record. He's embracing, it's a guitar rock album again. It's got soaring melodies. How do you not love Awake?
Right. Winter Rose, Love Awake is one of the strongest things he's ever done.
For the gospel on
so.
After the Ball, right? Or To You is a great little tune, or Spin It On,
Well, we know that, Ken, we can agree that To You is a lot better than For You, right?
I didn't want to talk about For You or Come On to Me. Luke Paul, again, I know you watch the show, lose those two. On Back to the Egg, there was the video age is just around the corner. We were early adopters with cable TV, so we had HBO Jukebox or whatever that was called. We'd watch a lot of videos, and I was so excited because they made videos for almost everything on Back to the Egg.
Yeah.
Remember, some were shot around the castle, or the World War I or World War II biplane, Baby's Request.
Yep.
And so I waited to watch that special when they showed it on network TV in 1979. That was a highlight. I watched the damn Jerry Lewis telethon so I could see the debut of the Getting Closer video when they're in the van.
With the windscreen wipers going.
Oh yeah, that's how obsessed I was. I had to sit through a lot of Jerry Lewis to get to that video.
I'm telling you, and that was a big deal. You had 8 videos. I think eight videos for that. That was a pretty big deal for Paul. He had not done that many videos for one album before. He did a couple, but that was a full on thing. And boy, that'll be great to have once we get it back in our hands again, when it eventually comes out all cleaned up.
Yeah, well, that's the question I wanted to get to Ken. Ken, does he continue the archive collection, or are we just now in the 50th anniversary Half-Speed Master era now of Paul releasing material?
I really couldn't tell you. My understanding was that some interviews and some material was culled to do London Town and Back to the Egg. Again, Paul, I know you watch the show. Get those out there. I can't wait for them. Because with each one of these sets, it's almost like it's a new release, right? You get to enjoy.
Yeah.
God, I so delved into the Wings Over America one. That was done so very, very, very well. let's get these things out there.
Right.
All of it needs to be revisited. I know we're getting to the end of Wings and our subject, but my God, I can't wait till we get to take another look at Press,
Sure.
Play, or you name it. I'm excited.
How is Waterspout still not official? How is Waterspout still not officially released? We need that song out officially. I mean, forget this bootleg crap. Just give me
but I've had it for 25 years, so it's like, okay, now I'll just have a cleaned up version of it. I mean, we've all had it forever.
Yeah, forget that. Yeah.
I've written a couple books, and
really?
Occasionally one of my novels will get optioned. And I'll have to deal with presses to fill out paperwork so somebody can pretend they're going to make it into some kind of film that they will not do, and they end up not doing. But I've had hassles with the presses, and I've said to them, why are you creating so many roadblocks here? Just sign the form. They're probably not going to make the film. Most of them don't get made. But why are you standing in the way of activating our copyright? I would say the same thing to the people who were once the Beatles. Get this material out there, because it's amazing how it will connect with people. I may have told you this story, Andy. I had a great moment in my last Beatles class last fall. A year ago in the fall, I had played offhandedly. I played the Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp.
Oh yeah. I remember this story.
I played it because I was showing how they could create lyric videos, right? And when I got my evaluations, one kid wrote, "I want to thank you for that one moment in class. That is now my favorite song in the whole world." This 18-year-old kid hears this song and it changes his life.
Did you show that you showed the video on Keynote that you made for this song?
Yeah, and he goes, it's all, I listen to it constantly. And that's what happened. That's the magic of what these guys do, right? Is they create melodies, and Waterspout should be one of those that someone somewhere will fall in love with. Get it out there. What's the holdup? You have this material, you have these copyrights, activate them.
Please. And on that note, Ken, we have reached the end of our conversation on Wings, as it is with Back to the Egg. Please give us an update on Diaries for Mal for 2025.
Going to make a big push this weekend. We have a designer now at the press, and we're working on putting them together. The current design is a kind of oversized, almost 8.5 by 11, so we can have full shots of those beautiful color shots that Mal took, some of which were in book one, but are much more impressive in their original color and at a real size. I'm editing the diaries, and I'm editing the manuscripts, and I'm keeping the foot on the pedal. We're also simultaneously working on a documentary about Mal's life.
Excellent.
Gotta start talking to these folks while they're still alive, right?
Yes. Yes. And Ken, you're thinking like a multi-part series for this?
Possibly, as the director reminds me, it depends on what the world wants to buy. It could be 5 episodes, 3 episodes, could be one film, whatever makes the most sense. There are enough story arcs in Mal's life, though, to go as many as 5. Especially if you, in our minds, there's such amazing mysteries that linger inside of his story. The loss of the material, right? The nature of his relationships, why he engineers his death in such a spectacular way. There's a lot to cover, but again, it will be determined by the marketplace. I just want to make sure that we get as much done this year, and that we talk to folks while we still have them, because we've been unfortunately losing a lot of folks. I was so nervous when Joey Molland was not well there for a while. I'm glad he's had a turn for the better, because he's our last witness to what happened when they made No Matter What. Right.
It's people. It's time is just undefeated, Ken, and you've got to get these people on record while we have them.
You were right. Time keeps winning. Damn it.
Time keeps winning. So something like a project of.
I want to quote Ringo Starr, on this. What is his quote about time?
I don't know.
Besides time after time?
Time takes time after time takes time.
Time,
which
time
is-
takes time.
time
Yeah,
takes time.
takes time.
Time takes time. So a project of this undertaking, like a series, is this a multi-year thing out? Like we're talking like it would, you're working on it, developing it, and we're looking at like something down the line in a year or two, or
I'm happy to say I don't do these things. Somebody else does. I don't make films. I don't know how to do that. I operate in a consultancy fashion. I know where everything's buried, right? I know if you need a certain story, I know where it is on my hard drive. I probably don't have it memorized. I know where the photos are. I can do all that kind of work for you. I've created about a 30-page timeline of Mal's life, so I have that kind of material. But I don't make the films. Now, conducting these interviews and getting this thing cut really is a pretty quick process.
right.
All in terms of how these things go. The fellow I'm working with right now is Danny Gold. He's made several works for HBO. It's just dynamite, and he has involved himself and immersed himself in all things Mal.
Excellent. And I think coming up also this year, we can see Ken in a new documentary called "Living on Borrowed Time." Right, the one about John Lennon's last days. That's coming out this year.
If I make the cut, then yeah, I'll be honored to be in that film. But they came down to Asbury Park during COVID, and we shot a lot of footage. So hopefully I made the final cut.
Hopefully, we got it.
We're gonna see you at the fest this year, New Jersey or Chicago.
Oh yeah,
of course.
40 minutes to the north, but absolutely. I'll go as long as they have them.
Excellent. So we're going to wind things down here for episode 269. We'd like to thank Ken Womack for being on here to kick off Two Legs for 2025. Ken, thank you for joining us here tonight. It's been an honor and always a pleasure to have you on our show and geek out on all things Beatles, solo. You kick it around today. We did Wings, and I really appreciate the insight, some of the things we hear about from your students who are actively learning this stuff now and appreciating it and doing it with your guidance and mentorship. And I think it's fantastic to keep this thing going and keep them interested and engaged. Because as you said at the start of the show, it's like a tapestry, right? It's just one big thing that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they're just scratching the surface. So we owe it to the younger generation to teach them this stuff and get it out there for them and paint that thing and just let them see how big it can be, including the Wings and solo stuff. And they'll get to it. They will.
And let's face it, and you do the same thing in your courses, I know, Andy. One of my goals by teaching the Beatles is to inspire them to do their own great things. Right?
Yes.
Now is their time. Whether it's in the world of video or whatever it happens to be, grab your art form and make it happen.
And absolutely. So, for Ken Womack and my partner in crime, Tom Hunyadi, I'm Andy Nichols, signing off for Two Legs. We'll see you all next week. Have a great week. Stay safe. And no snow here in New Jersey. Hopefully. Shh. Bye, everybody.